Welcome to the lecture on Children with Special Healthcare Needs, Part 1. This is a three-part lecture series, and I am Dr. Fawaz Siddiqui from the Department of Pediatric Dentistry, and I will be covering the first part of this lecture series. The intended learning outcome for this lecture is that you should be able to classify special child, and you should be able to discuss in detail about the medical and dental management of physically and mentally challenged children. To begin with, we must understand the difference in the terminologies between impairment, disability, and handicap. So impairment is specific problem with the body, while disability is when that impairment causes restriction of function of body, and when the disability restricts daily activities, it is called as a handicap. So you can see here the picture of Stephen Hawking. When he was young, he had a problem in his brain which was very specific, so he had an impairment, and later when he died, that impairment had become his handicap. So remember, specific is impairment. For example, you cannot breathe properly, you have a breathing problem, it could be because of the impairment of your respiratory system, and when this breathing problem does not allow you to run, it becomes a disability. And when disability restricts your activities, that means you cannot climb a staircase, okay, it becomes a handicap for you. So these three you must understand, because these will be used intermittently, so must understand the difference between the three. Okay, so we have to define children with special needs. This has been defined by the Oral Health Division by the Ministry of Health Malaysia as specified groups of children with some form of handicap that prevents them from living a normal life and necessitates the involvement of others in their everyday living. So that means these are children who require some form of support and assistance from their caregivers to move them through their daily living. The American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry have also defined children with special health care needs, and they say individuals with special health care needs are those who have physical, mental, sensory, behavioral, cognitive, emotional impairment limiting conditions that requires medical management, healthcare intervention, and use of specialized services and programs. So these conditions may be developmental or acquired, and these may cause limitations in performing daily self-maintenance activities or substantial limitation in a major life activity. So this definition kinds of sums up all possibilities like physical, mental, sensory, behavioral, cognitive, emotional, which will require some kind of medical intervention, some kind of healthcare intervention, and specialized services to help these children, support these children. So this is more a comprehensive definition of children with special healthcare needs, one that we should keep in our minds. So when we try to define children with special healthcare needs broadly, they can be divided into two. One is the developmental disability. Okay, now these are developmental disabilities, and these are one of those congenital inbuilt disabilities in the patient. For example, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, autism. Then you have attention deficit hyperactive disorder, blindness, deafness, intellectual disability. So these are all are developmental. On the other hand, we can have medically compromised children with special health needs. These are children with some kind of medical condition like diabetes mellitus, hemophilia, cystic fibrosis, asthma, rheumatic heart disease, chronic renal failure, AIDS, and viral hepatitis, and among the many. So in today's lecture, we will try to summarize the developmentally disabled classification of children with special healthcare needs. With any kind of children with developmental disability, we must understand some fundamental dental management or fundamental things that we should do for them. So for example, we have to make an appropriate treatment plan which requires systematic planning so that we don't call these patients again and again for frequent dental visits. So we call them infrequently with a proper treatment plan so that we complete the work in as less appointment as possible. The relatives and caretakers play a crucial role in the maintenance of their oral health, because these are the children who may not be able to brush their teeth on their own and they need to be supervised by relatives or caretakers. Third one is traditional behavior management techniques may not work with them because the level of their cognitive development may be impaired, the level of their understanding may be impaired. So traditional non-pharmacological behavior management techniques may not work. Scheduling of the appointment should be done early in the morning for two reasons. One is that the children are more fresh and the dentists themselves are fresh to take on some challenging cases in the morning, while the dentist gets tired by the afternoon, so it's not a very good time because these patients require extra time for treatment and extra patience for treatment. So it's always better to appoint such patients as the first appointment of the day, so when the dentist is fresh and when the patient is also fresh. We also need to take into consideration the medical condition of the patient, because the children with developmental disabilities may have comorbidities with involvement of other body functions like the heart, the liver. So we must have medical consultation and we must coordinate with the physicians in case any dental management is required. And this makes it important that we have an informed consent from the caretakers, because developmentally disabled children may not be able to give their own informed consent. So the caretakers must give the informed consent. So make sure we take an informed consent from the caretaker after describing to them the treatment plan, the complications that can happen, the alternative treatment plan, their complications, and the best treatment plan that we have selected. Behavior guidance, again, like we discussed, the pharmacological behavior guidance techniques, traditional ones, non-pharmacological ones may not work, but we must give it a try. Some things like tell, show, do, communication, that we have to attempt and see how the patient responds. Then we need to put into place preventive measures first. It is very important to initiate preventive measures in children with developmental disabilities very early in life, so that we can avoid any surgical treatment later on in life. Like extraction is a very difficult procedure to carry in them. Root canal therapy is very difficult to carry because of the lack of cooperation from the children. So it is important that we initiate preventive measures like diet counseling, topical fluoride application, oral hygiene maintenance, tooth brushing, fluoridated toothpaste quite early in life to avoid any caries, lesions, and periodontal inflammations. And of course, when we we decide to do dental treatment, we need to have appropriate protective stabilization armamentarium present with us. Protective stabilization has been covered in behavior management, but we will also quickly review some of which we can use. So protective stabilization can be divided into protective stabilization was initially called as physical restraints. All right, so the physical restraint was a word much crude. So protective stabilization is what is needed now, or medical immobilization is also referred uh, as protective stabilization. So we can have medical immobilization of the body, of the extremities, of the head, and of course intraoral. So for the body we have Pappos board, triangular sheet, pedi-wrap, safety belt. Extra assistant can be used to stabilize the patient or to hold the patient's arms and legs for a certain period of time. This can be with your assistant, or the caretaker or the parents themselves can do this. For extremities we have posti straps, velcro straps, towel tape, and of course extra assistant. For the head we have head positioner, forearm body support, plastic bowl, extra assistant, and intraoral we can have padded tongue blades, malt mouth prop, McKeeson's mouth props, and we can also use towel to prevent child from biting on his teeth and closing his mouth. So let's look at some of the pictures and see if we can identify these protective stabilization. So you can see in this picture you have this, which is the neck support. It prevents a child from turning their head, so it stabilizes the neck and therefore stabilizes the head. This is a triangular sheet which is wrapped around the patient, so the patient cannot move his upper extremities. And if you can see, the lower legs are also tied up with something called as the Posey straps. These are the Posey straps. It is tied to the armchair. The legs could be tied to the base of the dental chair. So these are Posey straps. These are again um, triangular sheet, a modified triangular sheet. Then you have the Pappos board, which has got the head stabilizer, the upper extremity, the abdomen, the legs. Comes in different sizes. The Pappos board. These are your elbow velcros. So if you put these on, the child cannot bend their elbows, so it cannot interfere with the oral work that you are doing. So you can maintain their arms by the side of their body. Then you have this an example of padded wooden tongue blades on here, and here also you have padded wooden tongue blades. Then you have this molds mouth prop, which keeps the mouth open. Mostly you use it in cases when you're doing under general anesthesia, but you can also use it in uncooperative patients or children who really cannot understand. And then you have your McKeeson's mouth prop or the bite block we use. So you should be able to recognize these uh, protective stabilization armamentarium in the clinic, and you should know how to use them appropriately, which has been covered in your behavior management lectures. A few considerations on the modification of your clinic's design, of your operatory design. As you can see in the diagram here, you should have ample of space for the wheelchair access. You should have straight access for the wheelchair, and then you should have mobile equipments uh, so that the chair can be adjusted accordingly. Similarly, the dimensions are given in this particular figure for us to know that the door should be about 36 inches wide, which is very comfortable to push wheelchair through. The mobile equipment should enhance the opportunity to back the patient's wheelchair into the operatory and thus reduce the need for more wheelchair turning space. If possible, a wider radius for turning space is desired to accommodate wheelchair extensions and adaptations that required for some persons. So there may be some wheelchairs which may require to be extended, or some which can be tilted, as we'll see in the next slide. The dental chair should be adjustable. The dental chairs should be adjustable for height to match the different wheelchair designs in the operatory, and the doorway should be 10 inches wider than the normal for your particular operatory. So there are some operatory modifications to make your dental clinic or operatory accessible for children with special healthcare needs. These are some photo pictures showing how the dental chair and the wheelchair itself can be used as a dental chair. So if you can see here, they have some modifications done, and the patient's dental chair can be tilted so that the dentist can work. So if in this picture, if you see, the actual dental chair is back up here, and then there is an equipment on which the chair is can be tilted back so the dentist can work in the same position. So these are some modifications you can do, especially found in clinics who are dealing with children with special healthcare needs. So some modifications of operatory. Now, all clinical examination is really incomplete when you have to take a radiograph. So some uh, things that you need to take care is that adequate radiographic records are often necessary in planning dental treatment for the child with disabilities. Occasionally, assistance from the parents and the dental auxiliaries and the use of protective stabilization may be necessary to obtain the radiographic films or the radiographic image. Better cooperation may be elicited from some children by delaying radiography until the second appointment when they are familiar with the dental office and have found it to be a friendly place. Also remember to tie an 18-inch floss to the hole made in the tab for the bite wing to facilitate retrieval of the film if it falls towards the pharynx. So you must have uh, a safety mechanism in case the child loses the film at the back of the throat, so you must be able to retrieve it. So 18 inches length floss you should tie as it is shown here. So this is the radiographic film, and then you have this tab and this hole in the tab and the floss. So it's a very important protective mechanism for the radiographic technique. The mother is holding the child and the limbs are really flaccid. So what are the different types of cerebral palsy that we may encounter in our clinic? The types are divided into the according to the motor defect and according to the extent of involvement of the limb. So look at the motor defect. It can be spastic, dyskinetic, rigidity, ataxic, hypotonia, and mixed of the above. And according to the limb involvement, it can be monoplegia, paraplegia, hemiplegia, or quadriplegia. So when the child comes to your clinic and you recognize some signs of cerebral palsy, normally the caregiver or the parents will give you a full history of cerebral palsy. So you do not undertake any dental management until you have reviewed the medical history of the patient, and then you see what kind of cerebral palsy the child is suffering from, and then from there you can decide how you can continue the treatment and what protective stabilization you have to use and what dental considerations are there, which we will see in a while. So the common dental conditions seen in children with cerebral palsy is periodontal diseases, obviously because they cannot brush their teeth by themselves and the caretaker has to brush it for them. And if they are negligent, then we see a lot of periodontal diseases and gingival inflammations. Then we have gingival overgrowth, mostly because of the comorbidity of epilepsy, where the child is on anticonvulsant drugs like phenytoin sodium, sodium valproate. So these will call gingival hyperplasia, gingival overgrowth. Then you will have caries for the reason of poor oral hygiene. Then you'll have malocclusion, bruxism, because the child cannot control his muscles of mastication, so they'll go into spasm, tonic spasm. Then you can have increased susceptibility to traumatic injuries because they cannot control their body movements. They can try to, initiate some physical activity and then they may fall and injure themselves. Then you have drooling because they cannot control their musculatures, and tongue thrusting and mouth breathing is also found to be common in these particular special children. So how do you manage these children if they come to the clinic? All right, so treat the patient in their wheelchair is rule number one, because they feel comfortable in their wheelchairs and they are nightly snugly sitting. So it's very important to provide all the comfort for these patients if they are on the wheelchair. In case you want to lift the patient onto the chair, dental chair, then you need to do something like 2% lift transfer to the dental chair. All right, so there is which should be very swift movement. We need to stabilize the patient's head because the patient cannot control his muscles, so he may be having this continuous involuntary movement of the head. We have to maintain the patient's body in the midline of the chair with arms and legs close to the body, right? So it's very safe for them so that they don't fall off the chair if you're working on them, so they should be in the middle. Do not place the patient in the supine position because of the trouble. They cannot control their swallowing, so they find it very uncomfortable when they are put into the supine position. So make sure the backrest is semi-reclined and you work on the semi-reclined position. So if you see in the radiograph, in the photograph that I have put in, the clinical assistant or the dentist is trying to take a radiograph, right? So the patient is sitting in the dental chair and it is semi-reclined. Then you need to stabilize the body to control the flaying movements of the extremities. So you need to ensure that your protective stabilization is well used. Use mouth probes carefully because it can cause gag or it can increase the gag reflex, and there will be difficulty in swallowing reflex. So it's very uncomfortable for these children, so make sure you use them judicially. Avoid any abrupt movements, noise and lights. Forewarn the patients if you are going to do any switching on the lights, or you are going to use the handpiece or the scaler, or don't do any sudden movements, they get startled. So these group of children have something called as the startled reflex, and they get the reflex gets initiated by abrupt movement. And when you introduce your instruments into the oral cavity, you need to do it very slow, otherwise the gag reflex will kick in. Use of rubber dam for restorative procedure is highly recommended to control the swallowing and to ease the patient, and of course the operator, the work gets done faster. And when you talk about work get done faster, you need to work efficiently and you need to minimize the patient time in the chair, otherwise they may get bored and frustrated and we may lose their whatever little cooperation that they are offering. Next, we look at visual impairments, the children who cannot see properly. So the visual impairment can be congenital since birth or acquired later in life. It can be partial, which they can see or read but partially with help of assistant, or it can be complete, the child is completely blind, cannot read at all. So there may be an spectrum from complete to partial. And the visual impairment is also associated with other conditions that we must be aware of, like deafness and mental retardation. These children typically exhibit self-stimulating activities like eye pressing and finger flicking. So if you are looking at the children with these kind of self-stimulating activities, you must feel suspicious that these children may have visual impairment. Because they are visually impaired, they lack self-help skills, so they require assistance and the support of their caregivers to dress them up and to comb their hair and to get them through their daily activities. So you should not expect much from these children in terms of any help that you want the children to, like, keep your mouth open or can hold this or something like that. So these, just understand that these children lack self-help skills. Then you have to make a distinction between the children who once had sight and became blind afterwards. So these are the children who can understand much better what you're trying to ask of them or you're trying to instruct them, because once upon a time they saw the things in light. So the children who are blind since the first time you saw them, they will have difficulty in understanding the instructions that you're saying, and they may require more help. So common dental conditions associated is hypoplastic teeth, dental trauma to the anterior teeth. Obviously, they are prone to traumatic injuries, prone to accidents because they cannot see and they will be tripping over things and they will be hitting their face against the wall or against the door and things like that. And then they will have gingival inflammation because they cannot brush their teeth properly. They really cannot see where they have brushed and if the plaque has been removed and food is being sticking. So these children will find it very difficult to brush their own teeth. So gingival inflammation secondary to poor oral hygiene. So how do we manage them? So the patient should be allowed to touch and feel the dental chair and the equipment and the instrument. So they kind of make a mental imaginary image of the thing that they feel. A brief step-by-step description of the planned dental treatment should be given so that they can understand and then they can relate to what you are saying, to whatever they have touched and felt, the chair, the equipment and the instruments, so they can relate the mental images. The patient should be allowed to hear the sound of dental equipment before implementation is done, not to surprise them, otherwise they will get anxious and apprehensive. Then inform the patients of the material used in the oral cavity, because they have this high sense of taste and touch. So if you're using any dental material introducing into the oral cavity which may taste bitter or may taste unpleasant, you better inform the patient that something is coming up so they are prepared. So for these children, you also need to give an adequate description of your clinic or the operatory so that again they can make a mental image of their surroundings and then they feel comfortable once they know how things are spread out in the clinic. Holding the hand can be a very strong non-verbal communication of warmth and comfort. So it is it is advisable, recommended that you hold the child's hand or the shoulder to convey the uh, message of warmth to them, so they are not they're not anxious and they're not apprehensive and they are at ease. Then you need to use a technique called as tell, show, feel and do, which is a modification of tell, show and do. Here we add the factor of feel, because these children have a high sense of touch, taste and smell, so it really makes them comfortable once you have done your tell, show, feel and do techniques. So it makes them very comfortable. So some children will also be photophobic, so use of direct light on their eyes should be avoided. And you can use audio cassettes or tapes to explain the dental procedures, so they can put on their headphones and listen to the dental procedure, so you don't need to explain each dental procedure again and again. You also need to limit the people around the dental chair so that there is no commotion or there's no crowding and there's no a lot of people should not talk around these children. So these children it's important for us that they communicate with us. So avoid having people around the dental chair except the caregiver, who may also act as an interpreter. Maintain a relaxed environment, and it's very important that the dentist himself should be relaxed and comfortable and confident on managing such children. With this, we come to the auditory impairment. So here the child will have difficulty in hearing, and this could be again congenital or acquired, or it could be total or partial. And because the hearing is impaired, the speech may also be impaired or delayed at the best. And there are no specific dental conditions found in these children, which is different from the general population. So how do you manage these children? You have to uh, first decide how you're going to communicate with these children, because they cannot hear you. So you may need to have an interpreter, or you may have to know that these children will be lip reading, or you may use your sign language, or you can simply give them a writing pad and ask them to write and communicate. So really give the child the option how they want to do it, depending on how is the cognitive development of the child. Then you need to face the patient and remove your mask and speak normally. Pause more frequently than usual, because many children with auditory impairments do lip reading, so they can understand just by looking at your lips what you are saying. Again, they have the other sense like the sight, touch, and taste, which is enhanced, which kind of compensates for the hearing impairment. So they are very highly sensitive to these. Again, you use tell, show, feel, and do behavior management technique, and then you reassure the patient with non-verbal communication by smiling at them, by having a relaxed facial expression, okay, by giving them a tap on the shoulder, or the asking for a high five, or giving them a thumbs up. So this all kind of gives in a good a relaxed environment for the child to be in, and for the dentist to work with. The child should understand the dental equipment, how it will work and how it will feel. So there's no element of surprise there. Avoid background noise. So these children may have, maybe partially have auditory impairment. So just avoid any background noise, so they can uh, have a calm session with them. Ask the patient to turn off a hearing aid when using high-pitched powered instruments such as handpiece, scaling, and toothbrush device. So these kind of electronic devices will cause vibrations and high-pitched noises, which may be amplified by the hearing aid. So if the child is wearing a hearing aid, ask them to switch it off. And then avoid the element of surprise, as we discussed before. Allow extra time for each appointment, and this basically goes for all the patients who have developmental disability and you are working with. And of course you need to use hand gestures. It will be really nice to understand some of the hand gestures like stop, go, all right, I'm having pain and stuff like that. So you can also learn these hand gestures. Okay, so now we come to the part of mental disability, and an individual whose intellectual development is significantly lower than the average, and his or her ability to adapt to the environment is consequently limited, are called as those who are having mental disabilities or mentally challenged. In order to understand that, we had this Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale. So we can do a survey and we can find out what is the rating of these children, and depending on this rating, we classify these children as mild, moderate, and severe. And depending on this classification, we know how to communicate with them and the special treatment that will be required for the dental care. So example, mild is 67 to 52, and for communication wise, the child should be able to speak well enough for most communication needs, and these children are treated as normal. Maybe mild sedation or nitrous oxide inhalation sedation may be enough to for them to complete your dental treatment. Then you have moderate. Again, it is 51 to 36, and these are the children who have vocabulary and language skill such that the child can communicate at a very basic level. And it is here that we may need to have sedation protective stabilization, positive reinforcement, and of course general anesthesia for cases with extensive dental treatment, like multiple extractions, multiple pulpectomies. So you may want to go for a general anesthesia. The problem with these children are they cannot communicate. So your non-pharmacological behavior management techniques really cannot work. So you need to really depend on uh, protective stabilization, sedation, and general anesthesia for them. Then we have severe or profound mental disability, and these are the children who are mute or just communicate with grunts and little or no communication skills. So this definitely you have to go for sedation, protective stabilization, positive reinforcement. Again, they may work, may not work, and of course the general anesthesia. So if the child can be treated under general anesthesia and there's extensive needs, go for GA, and if there are only mild treatment needs or minimal treatment needs like scaling and topical fluoride, maybe you can go for a protective stabilization and do it with mouth props. Otherwise you can go in for sedation, but again it's easier said than done. So we need to ascertain the degree of mental disability, to ascertain the degree of communication, and then we can decide how best we can treat them. So for such children who have got this mental disability, who are mentally challenged or mentally retarded, we need to have two-prong approach. One is the pre-appointment approach, and the other one is the during appointment approach. So during the pre-appointment approach, we have to do something called as pre-appointment behavior modification. For these children, you have to give them a tour of the office and introduce the dental team members so that they get familiar with the names, and if not, at least with the faces, so they can recognize friendly faces. Then ask the child to bring their favorite toy or the blanket, because in when the childs are taxed with the stress of dental treatment, they always look for something which is comforting them, and they always have their favorite toys and blankets which they can hold, and they can cope with the dental treatment, the stress of the dental treatment. So do ask them to bring their favorite toy or a blanket. During the appointment, you have to speak slowly and you have to repeat instructions one at a time in an attempt that they can understand what you're trying to say. And you have to use any alternative forms of communication if required, like non-verbal, can use pictures, can use. Then you have to give them positive reinforcements. Of course, it goes on with material reinforcements and verbal reinforcements, and be sensitive with gestures and verbal requests, because these children really cannot understand what you're trying to convey or ask of them, or what are you requesting of them. Always invite the parents into the operatory so they get the first-hand experience of how you are treating their children with all your professionalism and care and warmth. And the parents can be a great help in controlling the child on the dental chair, because they are used to um, managing the child at home. So certain things the child are doing, and the parents will recognize that this is because of which they are doing that particular activity, and then they can inform the dentist that this is upsetting them, and the dentist can go on with the substitution of that dental treatment or a dental instrument. Then schedule short appointments early in the day. Goes without saying that we cannot keep these children in the clinic for a very long time, and of course the dentist has to be in a fresh mood at the beginning of the day to have those extra patience that is required with such patients. Sure. Like this, and then we will ask you if this what kind of medical condition if this patient is having. So you must understand all the clinical features like the slanted palpebral fissures and the depressed nasal bone. These patients is very common, so you must identify the facial features so that in the OSCE exams you don't get puzzled if we ask you if what this patient's medical condition is. So these are some physical signs that I have enlisted for you to remember, and always try to see if these physical signs fit into the picture of the patient to make a diagnosis, provisional diagnosis of Down syndrome. Of course, the final diagnosis will come from the physician. Then there are certain cognitive signs, like these children will have short attention span, they will have poor judgment, they will be impulsive behavior, they will be slow learners, they will have a delay in language and speech development. And when you talk about behavior per se, they will be very spontaneous, they will be warm, and genuine, and they will be gentle, and they will be honest, and they will show some anxiety and stubbornness. So in general, these children are quite friendly, but of course they may have some impulsive behavior, and they will be slow to learn. So if you're asking them to do something, you may need to repeat it twice or thrice so that they understand. So understand that these children have got some cognitive difficulties as well. For the dental sign, again, it's covered everywhere. I've just put a picture to show you how the fissure tongue would look like, and how, if you see, this patient is having the slanting of the papillary fissures with the depressed nasal bone, and in general the mid face is underdeveloped for these patients. So again, you must be able to recognize some general features. I have listed out some dental signs for you to remember. Always remember the malformed teeth and the missing teeth, small root, microdontia, oligodontia, open bite, macroglossia, mouth breathing, angular cheilitis. A lot of things are there. So you must remember and keep this in mind. And if you ask the questions of list any 4 dental signs of patients with Down syndrome, you must be able to put 4 at least from these the list that is given here. So the common dental conditions that is associated with patient with children who have Down syndrome is tooth wear from attrition and erosion. Somehow they have low caries prevalence, and they have a high prevalence of rapid destructive periodontal disease related to local factors. And these local factors are the tooth morphology, bruxism, malocclusion, poor oral hygiene, poor circulation, blood circulation of the periodontal ligaments, decreased humoral response. They have studies have found that the neutrophils, which are the first line of defense against any infection, they are short-lived, and this predisposes them to more infection. And of course, there are genetic influences which we really cannot explain. So if you see in the picture here, we have got 2 patients with Down syndrome, and this is a condition of their dentition. Remember, I told you malformed teeth. So these malformed teeth, this girl has got an anterior open bite, and they can have a rapid destructive periodontal disease. So it's very important to be aware of the rapid destructive periodontal disease in patients with Down syndrome, so that you can take proper steps and initiate the oral hygiene, and of course the reduce any gingival inflammation if present. So how do you treat children with dental management in general? For the patients who are non-apprehensive or mildly apprehensive, gradually introduce the procedure to them. Use positive reinforcement and minimize distractions. So otherwise they get distracted at looking at something else, and then they lose their focus because they have got short attention span. Give short explanation in simple language, and this you may have to repeat once or twice. You can use the desensitization technique that you have learned in your behavior management, and you can have trained and inform patients. If you use this technique properly, you can train your patients to behave properly, and you can also use videotape information before the treatment so the patient can watch and they can know what is expected of them or what is going to happen. Then you can do tell, show, and do, and you can use mouth props to maintain the opening of the mouth so that you can work very quickly. And these children, for some reason, they uh, like consistency, like they want to have the same practitioner, they want to see the same practitioner, they want to see the same room, and then they want to have the same chair for each visit. So there is some preferences for children with Down syndrome that we must look in. For patients who have got who are moderately apprehensive, we have to use sedation and protective stabilization. And of course, Down syndrome patients who are severe resistive, we have to go for general anesthesia. There's no two way about it. Okay, now we have something called as autism spectrum disorder. Now this is a neurodevelopmental disorder which is characterized by social impairments, cognitive impairments, communication difficulties, and repetitive behaviors. So we really don't know how where is the cause of this problem, but there is a some defect in the neural development of this nervous system, and you can have children with multiple impairments, and therefore it is called as autism spectrum disorder. So you can have from mild to very severe, from social to cognitive to communication to repetitive. So you can have a combination of all this. Like I told you, it ranges from very mild to very severe, and for some reason, males are 4 times more likely to have autism than females. And how do you recognize children who have autism? There are certain features that I have listed out for you. They may have one or two, or they may have all of these features, like they have an unusual interest and behaviors. So I was listening to this webinar where the presenter was telling us that he had a patient of autism who had this interest of collecting plastic bottles or plastic containers. So each time that patient used to attend the dental visit, the dental practitioner used to do positive reinforcement by giving these empty plastic bottles to the patient, and the patient would feel very satisfied and he would look forward to attending the clinic. So they have these unusual interests and behaviors. They have extreme anxiety and phobias as well as unusual phobias. So the things which are seems to be non-scary, this find it very scary. They like to line up the toys and other objects like I am showing you in the picture here. They like to do all this repeatedly, and this is for the cans. They can do it in the horizontally also on the floor, and they play with the toys the same way every time, so they don't experiment. They use the toy in the same way every time. They like parts of objects like small wheels. It quite fascinates them. The small parts of toys, they fascinate them. They get upset by minor changes, so they are used to consistency, just like we saw in the Down syndrome. So they get upset if there is any change in their routine or in how they are used to doing things. And they have these obsessive interests. Like I told you, they had this obsessive interest of collecting plastic bottles, and it's an unusual interest. But they have a patient with the autism spectrum disorder have this obsessive interest. Then here, this slide is full of things that these children can have, and have put it here with the hope that I don't miss out anything. So these child do not respond to their name. So they may appear deaf, but actually they are not deaf. They just don't respond. Uh, not point These children do not point at objects or things of interest, or they do not demonstrate any interest. They cannot play these pretend games. They avoid eye contact. They want to be alone all the time. They have difficulty understanding or showing understanding or other people's feeling or their own. So they have this cognitive and emotional impairment. They may have no speech or delayed speech, so they may start speaking very very late in life, or they may not speak at all, and they would like to communicate with pictures. That is how the parents are communicating with the children. They have these pictures of eating, drinking, or juice, and the child may come with the specific pictures, and they want to have a glass of water, they want to have a glass of milk, and things like that. And they tend to repeat words or phrases over and over again, something called as echolea. And they keep repeating their words they're saying. So it's like, give me juice, 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 and they will go on repeating it. They can give unrelated answer to the question. So you ask them something and they will totally give you an unrelated answer. Like I told you, they get upset by minor changes. They have obsessive interest. They flap their hands and rock their body or spin in circle, something that they like to do non-stop. Okay, so they are examples of repetitive actions. They have unusual reactions, over or under sensitive to the way things smell, sound, taste, feel, or look. So they are very conscious on that. They have low to no social skills. So basically cannot communicate with friends, cannot make friends. They cannot take care of themselves also. Then they need to be clothed and bathed and things like that. Uh, they avoid physical contact, right? So they don't like to be touched. They don't like to be hugged, right? They don't want to play anything which requires physical contact. They demonstrate little safety or danger awareness. So basically they are free birds and they're trying to experiment, and you try to hold them back, but they want to do even if it is dangerous. And they use reverse pronouns, and they says you instead of I. So it's like, you want an ice cream, it basically means I want an ice cream. So these are some things which is very common with children with autism spectrum disorder. Other symptoms may include hyperactivity. They are very active. They are impulsive. They act without thinking. They've got a very short attention span. They are aggressive. They can cause self-injury because there is something called as head banging. They would bang their head against the door, and they can do it continuously as a repetitive motion. They can have meltdowns, all right? So once they feel the situation, the circumstances is overwhelming, they may just throw a temper tantrum and have this meltdown as a way to show that they cannot cope up. Then they have unusual eating and sleeping habits. They have unusual mood and emotional reactions, very unpredictable. They have lack of fear, or they can have more fear than expected, and again they have this unusual sleeping habit. So it's kind of very difficult to deal with children with autism. So functionally, autism spectral disorder can be divided into three levels depending on the kind of support they need from the caregivers, level 1, 2, and 3. And here in this picture, it's very nicely done that level 1 have difficulty initiating social interactions, and organization and planning problems can hamper their independence. Level 2 is which gets severe, with social interaction is limited to narrow special interest and frequent restricted and repetitive behavior, and very severe, which require very substantial support from caregivers, where they have severe deficit in verbal and non-verbal social communication skills, and they have great distress and difficulty changing actions or focus. So this is kind of one of those severe things. So when you see a patient, they may be classified into one of these three depending on how they are, for you to understand what dental management map you have to choose. So how do we screen children with autism spectral disorder is something you have called as the modified checklist for autism in toddlers. And the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that all children receive this autism specific screening at 18 and 24 months, with broad developmental screening at 9, 18, and 24 months. Basically, because they said now we are able to recognize this disorder, and therefore we can help these children. Before, these children were going unnoticed and we were not able to help them. So they have come out with this checklist. Right at the age of 18 months, you can do this checklist to find out if they are having any symptoms of autism. Then the developmental screening is done by the doctor to assess how the child learns, speaks, behaves, and moves. And all children should be screened for developmental delays and disabilities at 9 months, 18 months, 24 months, and 30 months, in order to catch any developmental disorder, and appropriate help can be provided, support can be provided. And lastly, you have something called as comprehensive diagnostic evaluation, which is a review of child's behavior and development, and you interview the child's parents, and you do hearing and vision screening, genetic testing, neurological testing, and all other medical testing. And these are basically done by developmental pediatricians, child neurologists, and child psychologists, child psychiatrists, people who are very specialized in handling or recognizing children with with autism spectrum disorder. So the common conditions here is occlusal atresia due to persistent bruxism, and the diet can be carcinogenic because they may not want to chew on hard fibrous food. And of course, oral hygiene may be poor due to the child's inability to brush, and they may resist to accept assistance while brushing. So it is a very difficult situation. So how do you manage these children? Autistic children do not like change, so ensure that the same practitioner, the same dental chair, the same room is used for treating them. Regular dental examination can be very difficult, and it may require several dental visits to to make the child feel comfortable with the dental environment. So don't think that we can do all the treatment in one go. There may be multiple visits required to start off a treatment. Observe patient's movement and look for patterns so that you do not interfere into those movements or patterns. Otherwise, the child may get upset and then they can have a meltdown. Avoid loud noises and bright lights because they may again upset the patient. Use short appointments, same chair, same assistant, and be prepared. Be firm, be gentle, and use exaggerated tell, show, do technique with positive reinforcement, and use desensitization uh, as early in the treatment. So these children require more instructions than necessary. And then of course protective stabilization with bite block and sedation can be used, and if everything fails, general anesthesia can be used. So you see in the picture here, the child is wrapped up in the triangular sheet on the dental chair, so he doesn't move. It's a quite uncomfortable situation. For children with the autism disorder, again, like we said, preventive treatment is of very high priority, and most of the visit is mostly for checkup and topical fluoride application, so can be managed on an outpatient uh, visit. With this, we come to the last part of today's presentation, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Again, this was something which was ignored for a very long time, and we have now been able to diagnose children with this ADHD disorder, and it is also termed as a hyperkinetic syndrome, and it is characterized by inattention, which is not able to focus, or the attention span is very less. Then we have hyperactivity, which is excessive movement that is not fitting to the setting. So okay, so the movement which is not um, required in that particular circumstances. And then you have impulsivity, that is hasty act that occur in the moment without thought. So these are the children who will be running around the clinic and toppling things, throwing things, right, because they are so hyperactive and impulsive. So there are subtypes of ADHD, like inattentive and hyperactive, and the combination of inattentive and hyperactive depending on what kind of symptoms prevail. For example, in inattentive type, there will be more symptoms of difficulty in focusing, and hyperactive, they will be more, the symptoms will be more towards excessive movements. Unfortunately, there is no lab test to diagnose ADHD, right? And this makes the diagnosis very difficult, and the diagnosis involves gathering of all the information from the parents, from the teachers, from the other siblings, and there is a checklist, and medical evaluation has to be done with vision and hearing just to rule out any other medical problems. So really, it's the diagnosis is really on observation, and the common dental conditions these children will have is uh, tooth wear due to bruxism, and they may be on medications for other comorbidities which may cause xerostomia, which can cause increased risk of caries. So we must be aware of these two. Let's see how to manage them. Again, because the attention span is very less, we need to have a very short appointment. Okay, less than 30 minutes is a short appointment. Then we need to use the non-pharmacological behavior management techniques to the best. You can also use nitrous oxide and oxygen for anxiolysis and to calm the patient down. And for such patients, because they can understand, you can set rules and give short commands and be gentle but firm. And whatever you do, you must do it quickly, efficiently, so that you don't have to repeat the procedure or repeat the dental treatment again ever. So morning appointments is preferred, and then for these children, avoid delays in the waiting room because they get more upset and they get more hyperactive, and when they are into the operatory, they will be like super active. So just avoid delays in the waiting room. Take them first thing in the morning as first appointment. That was, in general, the developmental disabilities, how to recognize them and how to manage them in general. Of course, the dental treatment remains the same. The cavity preparation, the pulpotomy, pulpectomy, scaling, topical fluoride, all of those dental treatments remain the same. It's only the matter of how to dentally manage them is different in all the procedures. In Malaysia in 1993, they started, the government KKM started the oral health program for special children, and ever since it has been running. And some researchers have shown that the program has not been of much successful, basically because of problem of accessibility to the healthcare, because the healthcare provisions or the healthcare centers are inadequate, or the quality of care provided is not good as compared to the overall population, and these children have significant higher rates of poor oral hygiene and periodontal treatment needs than the general population, and parents of such children find difficult to get hold of dentists who are willing to treat their children. and it's very difficult because it requires time, it requires patience. So most of the general dental practitioners don't like to invest so much time on these children. So the basically who are really interested on, compassionate about children with special healthcare needs do the treatment. So there's always difficulty in finding the such dentist. Education of the parents and the patients with regard to prevention and the treatment of oral diseases must be planned at a very, very early stage. So if the patient is diagnosed with a developmental disability, the oral hygiene maintenance must be begun very early in life, so that by the time the child has all erupted primary teeth, they're all in good oral hygiene, and they have a good set of dentition, not only in the primary but also in the mixed dentition, and of course in the permanent dentition. And then the all the general dentist has to do is just to maintain the oral hygiene. With that, we come to the end of the session on children with special healthcare needs part 1. Take 5 minutes to recapitulate the main headings that we have learned here. In the exams, you may be asked to describe the dental management of a child with any one of the dental disabilities that we have discussed, maybe autism, maybe cerebral palsy, maybe with deafness, with visual impairment and stuff like that. And all through the year, the awareness of these activities are done regularly. For example, the October is a month for ADHD awareness. Then you have World Cerebral Palsy Day, which is celebrated on the 6th of October. Then we have World Down Syndrome Day on 21st of March, and then you have World Autism Awareness Day on 2nd April. So if you're really interested, you can participate in these activities in the college also. All you need to do is just put up a poster in the pediatric dentistry clinic or in the general dentistry clinic and impart information to the parents. So with that, I end the session, and thank you so much for listening to the presentation, and we will see you on the next presentation, which is part 2 of children with special healthcare needs. Take care and stay safe.